When we think about refugees, what's the first image that pops into your head? For most of us, it's that dramatic moment of escape, right? But what happens after that? Let's really get into it. Because crossing a border, well, that's not the end of the story. Not by a long shot.
And this quote, man, it just hits the nail on the head. Escape isn't the finish line. It's the starting point of a new set of battles. That's what we're exploring today, those new battles, the ones that are so often fought in silence, completely invisible to the rest of the world.
All right, so let's start right at that arrival point. Just try to picture it. You've been traveling for weeks, maybe even months, a lot of that time on foot. You finally arrive, and you are just completely drained, physically and emotionally. All you have is what you could carry. Maybe your kids, some important papers, and a handful of memories. Everything else? Gone. So, you've arrived. What's next? Well, the first fight begins immediately, and I mean the most basic fight, the battle for sheer survival. We're not even thinking about the future yet. This is about the day-to-day, moment-to-moment struggle just to live.
And for so many, that new reality is a refugee camp. And these camps, they're often dangerously overcrowded and just chronically underfunded. I mean, really think about that. You've got thousands of families all sharing a few water taps, standing in line for hours just for food, and living in tents or shelters that were never ever meant to be permanent homes. And then there's this constant looming threat, food insecurity. This isn't just a we're short on food today kind of problem. No, it's relentless. Rations get cut, deliveries are late, and families literally have to figure out how to stretch a little bit of food. Basically budgeting hunger, day in, day out.
Okay, so building on that, let's talk about the next giant hurdle, healthcare. After everything they've been through, the harsh journey, the trauma, people's bodies are just worn down. Their immune systems are weak, injuries haven't been treated. And when they get to a camp or a new town, there just aren't enough doctors, not enough medicine, not enough anything to handle the sheer number of people who need help. And you have to remember, for the most vulnerable people, we're talking about kids, the elderly, those with disabilities, this lack of healthcare isn't just some inconvenience. It's a straight-up life-or-death situation. This next part just puts it so starkly. Think about it. Getting sick? That shouldn't feel like a dead end. But for so many refugees, it does. A common cold, an infection. It can become this terrifying crisis because there's just no safety net. It's a dead end, right where a path to getting better should be. So, okay, let's say you manage to survive day to day. Now you face a whole new set of problems. Let's call them invisible walls. These are the systemic barriers that make it almost impossible to actually start over, to build any kind of future. A huge one is education. We're talking about millions of refugee kids who lose years of their education. And it's because of all these hurdles, being displaced, not having the right paperwork, not being able to afford fees. It's a massive, massive blow to their entire future. And this question really gets to the core of it, doesn't it? It's not just about finding a school. How can a kid possibly focus on math when their mind is just screaming, trying to feel safe? When a child has seen things no one should ever see, their brain is working overtime just to process that grief, that fear. Learning becomes, well, almost impossible. All right, now let's talk about another one of those invisible walls. And this one is a big one, the language barrier. It's like a domino effect. Think about it. If you can't speak the language, how do you tell a doctor what's wrong? How do you make sure you're not getting ripped off at a job? How do you help your kids with their schoolwork? It shuts you out of almost everything. And this part is just heartbreaking. So many refugees are skilled professionals. They were engineers, teachers, programmers, you name it. But they arrive in a new country and suddenly, nothing. Their degrees aren't recognized, getting a work permit can take years, so they get stuck. They go from being contributors to being dependent on aid, trapped in this weird temporary limbo, unable to use the very skills that could help them and their new communities thrive. And that brings us to the final, and maybe the toughest battle of all, the human cost. The toll this all takes on a person's spirit. We're talking about the deep, internal, psychological wounds left by this whole experience. And a huge source of that pain is this, being judged for where you came from, not for who you are. Instead of seeing a person, an individual, people see a label, a stereotype. And that kind of judgment, it just leads to this crushing sense of isolation. It makes you feel like you've lost a piece of who you are. Which leads to this really powerful question. What is the cost? What's the price you pay for enduring things that no human heart should ever have to endure alone? Because that trauma, it doesn't just vanish the second you cross a border. It comes with you.
And the reality is, refugees are so much more likely to suffer from things like PTSD, severe depression, and chronic anxiety. And let's be crystal clear, this is not a sign of weakness. It's the brain's completely normal response to experiencing an abnormal, unimaginable amount of trauma and loss.
Okay, so after walking through all of these challenges, from basic survival to these deep internal wounds, how do we change the way we look at this? What's the big takeaway here?
I think it comes down to this. This is the core idea. The problem isn't that refugees aren't strong enough or resilient enough. They are, incredibly so. The real problem, the real crisis, is our lack of systems, our lack of opportunity, and sometimes our lack of basic human compassion to actually support them in that fight to rebuild.
And I want to leave you with this final thought. When we help people who have lost everything get back on their feet, it's not really just about them. It's about us. It's a mirror. It reflects our own humanity back at us. Helping them stand, that's how we remind the world and maybe even ourselves how to stand with its own soul.